In Search of the Wow Wow Wibble Woggle Wazzy Woodle Woo was definitely a collaboration. I'd been performing the music for a couple of years and had generated a lot of interest in my performances.
Stand up and do the wow wow wibble wobble.
We were actually interested in creating some kind of promotional piece that we could use to sell the live show. Along comes Barry. He came and saw what I was doing. He said, "Whoa, you got to do something more than that. You've got to capture this as a piece of art."
I listened to the album, In Search of the Wow Wow Wibble Woggle Wazzy Woodle Woo, and
you can say it.
Yeah, but I realized that when I listened to it, I thought, well, this is a soundtrack. I mean, it's the soundtrack to whatever we do is already done. So I thought, let's just write something around this record, and we did. That's what we started out doing.
Mm-hmm. The set designer that we worked with is Roland Thomas, and he did something that I thought was quite remarkable. He actually looked at some original drawings that I had done for the album, and they were pen and ink drawings. And he said, "Well, there's your set right there. It should be like a three-dimensional pen and ink drawing." We'd all talked about monochromatic, creating a set that colors would pop out from. When there's costume changes, they're really dramatic, and when things come out of the wall, it just creates all this excitement.
Yeah, it set the stage for the imagination, so we really had a visual difference between Tim's normal life, which was the monochromatic, and when imagination kicked in, that's where we had all the colors and all the set pieces and everything that kind of flew in and out. So it really was a nice backdrop for us. Tim's jumping all over these sets. Those sets were built for that purpose.
Every little object that was on the set, it's important to note, had to be painted that color. And there's a lot of little objects that needed that kind of painting.
Yeah, everybody was involved with did everything. We did everything on that show, from painting to, to construction to just, everything. And
sometimes having a limited budget or having parameters like that actually forces you to be more creative.
Yeah.
And come up with things that, like, maybe if you had a big budget, you could throw a lot of money at it, but it wouldn't necessarily be as cool, I think it worked in our favor.
I think the message you get out of that is, if you really want to do something, if you really are dead set on a project and know that that project should be done, that you can do anything, as we say in the song. You can do anything.
You'll find a way, and of course, just having the right people involved, people that really had the same interest at heart, that wanted something wonderful to come out of this, is what really made it all work.
Well, the whole entrance sequence where Tim comes in and is dealing with the radio was quite the fun bit to do. If you listen very carefully, you'll hear a couple versions of my voice, you'll hear a couple versions of Tim.
All right! That was Iron Underwear, and this is KLED coming at you with the heaviest metal in town. Hey, you.
That's Barry's voice that you hear. This is the bit about iron underwear.
Screaming Maniacs.
And now, the Screeching Maniacs.
All right! And now the new one by the Screeching Maniacs, Primal Love!
Do that voice again.
Oh, yeah. No, please.
Cool.
I would really hurt myself if I tried to do that.
It was such a great setup to get into the whole closet.
Don't peek in the closet, don't open the door, don't look in the closet, you'll be sorry for sure.
Of course, when you're told not to do something, you really, really, really want to do it anyway. The closet, the closet, the closet, the closet.
Don't go in the closet.
Don't go in the closet. The closet was when I was growing up, and I'd be laying in bed at night, and the closet door was open. It was like, I was just afraid of what was in there. Well, I guess it's just because it's dark. can't really see in there. So you can imagine all kinds of things, and I'd scare myself with what I could imagine.
Hence, Musty Moldy Melvin.
Zoom, zoom, zoom. I started writing Zoom when I was in high school, actually. I was thinking back about my childhood and the things that entertained me as a child that were so simple, like blowing bubbles into a glass of milk or humming while you chewed your peanut butter sandwich. And it just grew out of that little poem.
From a shooting standpoint, Zoom was probably the toughest one we attempted. The original filming of it never made it to the original piece because when we shot it with Tim actually flying on a harness, and we couldn't make the harness work very well. So we spent quite a bit of time trying to make the harness work, and it just wouldn't work. So what we had to do after we got done with the initial shooting was go back and go into a green screen scenario and take him into space and do some little special effects things. And in the long run, I think it worked really well. I think it worked almost better than what we had originally thought up. But it was quite the workout for Tim that day.
In my mind's eye, I saw myself literally running on the walls, and in my imagination, anything was possible. We had to do a little compromising from that, and I think it worked. Yeah. If I only knew, if I only had a clue about the wow, wow, wibble, woggle, wazzy, woodle, woo.
'Cause if I had a clue, then I'd know what to do to find the
Wazzy Woodle song that is kind of the climactic moment in the movie. It came from an idea I had about creating a dance that kids could do. And when we created the story for the Wazzy Woodle Woo, I realized I needed a song that asked the question, what is it?
Still I bet I'll find one yet.
So I just started posing questions in my mind and writing them out, and the tune came out of that. The song If I Was something I wrote again earlier in time.
One of the things where Tim gets, where the gorilla comes out of the chest and pulls his pants off. Well, we rehearsed that and it worked perfect every time, but we didn't rehearse it with the gorilla costume on.
Take two.
That happened to be Tim's brother, Creed, was in the gorilla costume. So when he put the gorilla costume on, he really couldn't see where to grab. One of the times he grabbed it, he actually ripped the costume.
I was just having fun with animals and kids trying to imitate them, like a possum hanging by its tail from a tree and an elephant.
If I was an elephant.
But this song needs an ending, so I came back around to, after all this, I've imagined myself as this kind of animal and that kind of animal, but it's just me. And after all, that's who I want to be. And that's really the message of the song. You can have fun and you can imagine yourself all sorts of things, but in the long, when it all comes down to it, you're just great the way you are. The monkey song. It came out of a little tune that was floating around in my head for a long time. It was just a very simple do 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 do.
Build a house up in the trees.
And I didn't know what that song was about for a long time, and one day, there it was. Just a whole fun idea of what if you had a family of monkeys, and then pretty soon you've got a whole forest full of monkeys in the trees, and they're all my friends.
That was a tough one to do, actually. There was a lot of puppeteers running all over the place with that, just because there were so many people.
So many people involved, yeah. The Big Booger. If there was a kid's top 10 or a top 40, that song would have been right up at the top.
I was walking to school.
Every time I sang that at elementary schools, the kids went wild. Everybody related to it. Everybody had a story about getting picked on. You know, I designed the song, really, I wrote it like kids out on the playground. I tried to use the same kind of language that they would use. I tried to make it a little bit, you know, not nice, you know, something that kids would be, it's a little bit gross, you know, and it works. The song Little Miracles
You mean there's more?
came out of just the whole idea that we're all like little miracles. It's just like all the incredible possibilities. And that's where I got into the line, so many magical surprises are going to happen to you. And then we had an idea to take it kind of into the magic realm.
There's no limit to the magic.
And I suppose I was largely inspired by Mickey Mouse and from Fantasia and The Sorcerer's Apprentice. The costume and everything came out of that whole thing. Sunshiny Morning.
Sunshiny morning.
Another one of those optimistic sort of songs. You step out your front door and you're expecting all the best. And largely inspired by a group called the Lovin' Spoonful. And what was really fun when we did it for the movie was to do that little bit of choreography and the little soft shoe stuff and the derby and the hat, all those kind of trademark things that the vaudeville performers did years ago that I grew up with, Jimmy Durante's and those kind of people. And it was fun to kind of emulate that. Musty, moldy Melvin moseyed out of the moss. I had an Uncle Melvin and an Aunt Gracie. And I didn't want to go quite, I didn't want to make it musty, moldy Melvin and greasy, grimy Gracie, because I thought that was a little too close. So I just kind of veered off just a little bit. Musty, moldy Melvin and greasy, grimy Gertie. So I wrote the song and created these imaginary characters in my mind.
They danced all night in a gurgly, gloppy groove.
And then we got to actually physically create them.
It was a sight to see.
But the funny thing about that, too, is those, obviously there are people in those. And we had to stop many times to let them get out of those things and give them water and keep them from passing out, because it was really toasty in there.
Yeah, movement was very constricted.
Really hard. They were bent over.
You could hardly move. They had these little tiny hands that stuck out the side, and their feet were barely sticking out the bottom. And they tried to make it look like they're moving. It just looked pretty funny. Started with some drawings that I did, and we worked with the puppeteers, or puppet makers, puppet constructors, and they took my ideas and actually they were pretty true to form. Friends with the Song was written several years before we made the album and made the film.
We might dream of diamonds, we might wish for gold.
It was written from a friend to a friend. I'd had the opportunity to think a lot about friendship and the value of it and the importance of it. But it took on a whole nother life when we wrote the script and started the movie, because it then became The friend is the inner friend, the friend inside, the friend that we all carry around with us from childhood.
The song is a beautiful, beautiful song, and I love what it's saying. But I also, from a technical viewpoint, I love when the painting sings.
And who knows what lies down the road or just around.
With this high, beautiful voice that just cracks me up.
Yeah, it's funny. The wow wow wibble woggle wazzy woodle woo.
That's it! That's what?
Was written to be like a celebration, a dance, celebrating that indescribable something that we all feel when we're just full of energy and joy. It's fun to say. You know, I was trying to come up with a combination of words that would be fun for kids to say and to sing. And the other thing that's fun about it is it's something that kids could learn to say that their parents would stumble over trying to say. So I made them a little bit smarter in that way.
Everybody that I always talk to always asks me, what really is the wow wow wibble woggle wazzy woodle? So Tim, do you want to tell everybody what it really is?
No. You'll have to watch the movie.
I Can Do Anything was shot in front of a live audience. The Wazzy Woodle was designed to shoot in front of a live audience. And what we found out when we were editing was that we really didn't want to leave the room for cutaways to the audience or anything. So this piece, this last piece, is the only one that we actually used that was shot live.
I Can Do Anything is probably the single most important message in the entire video. That's what we wanted to leave the audience with. It starts out, I can do anything, and then it's you can do anything, and then it's we can do anything. I guess if we had one thing to say to the audience watching out there, is that this was our little vision. This is something that we created in collaboration. You can do it too.
I can do anything. Anything at all. I can do anything.